Okay, cool. You want to get started?
Yeah, go for it. Um,
What is this? I don't know. Second in this series of what? What do we have? Three or four conversations? However many. I always lose count when we have these conversations, but I don't know. Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you are in the world. Super excited to be in conversation with Vivian today, and maybe we'll just bounce back and forth between questions that we have. And I can start off. So, how about uh, you tell us what brought you to social work? Like who you are, what brought you to the field?
okay. I thought that meant that you were going to go first, but I will go
Uh,
first. I see what you did. Okay. I'm Vivianne. My name's Vivianne Guevara. My day job is I'm the director of social work at the Federal Defenders of New York in the Eastern District. I teach now at Columbia School of Social Work. I'm a graduate of Columbia School of Social Work, and I'm also a field instructor for various schools in the New York City area. I've been a public defender for close to 15 years now. That's been my whole social work life, is as a social worker in public defense, specifically criminal defense in state court and civil court, and now federal court. Um, and what brought me to social work? Huh. Let's see. I was an older student, well, older, quote unquote older. It's not like I didn't really have a career before social work school. I was working jobs and surviving, and then decided to finally go finish my bachelor's degree when I was 28 or 29, and majored in psychology. And as I was going through psychology, I had some professors who were doing studies. They were psychologists, and they were doing studies in prisons. So I would read a lot of their papers. And what struck me all the time about reading those papers was that my professor and others were doing experiments and studies on folks who are incarcerated, but there never seemed to be any follow-up. Like, we're going to help these folks when they get out, or we followed these folks along and made sure they had what they needed, or I never saw that. And so I did ask my professor, what happens to the folks that you're studying? Do you just, you do it and then you leave? And they suggested that I go to social work school because to them, it sounded like I was social justice minded. So I took their advice, and that's how I ended up in social work school. I had never heard of social work before social work school, and kind of learned through social work school of what I wanted social work to be, what I saw a lot of things that I didn't believe were social work, or was very confused about why people were at social work school with some of the values that people expressed. And so that's how I ended up in social work school. And the rest is history. How about you, Durrell?
cool. Awesome. So for those who don't know me, and feel free for those in the chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, what you do. Super happy you guys could take some time out with us tonight. But my name is Durrell Washington. I am currently a third year doc student at the University of Chicago in the School of Social Work. And I kind of feel like I fell into the profession, right? Like just like you, I had no idea what social work was or like what it was all about. But when I finished high school, I went away to college. I was playing sports. I ended up getting hurt, and that didn't work out. So I was like, okay, I can't play ball anymore. Like I need to do something, right? I need to figure out what I want to do for my degree. So I went to school upstate New York, and kind of after I got injured and I graduated, this was a junior college. I got my associates. I came back and I took a gap year and was like working for this workforce development program where they get you internships at these Fortune 500 companies. Love the program. I'm an alum. I'm still an engaged alum, but it definitely showed me corporate America is not my thing. But one of my mentors in the program was a social worker, and I just loved the work that he did. How he was helping a lot of folks out because we all came from kind of like low income areas. So I'm like, okay, I can see myself studying this. So I ended up doing it. I have my bachelor's. Every single degree I have is in social work, from bachelor's coming up to get my PhD. And I noticed pretty early on that in my education that like the clinical route wasn't for me. I kind of felt like I always asked those big questions and how do you make kind of like the bigger change rather than kind of person to person. So I ended up going to Columbia as well to do my master's. And we got some Columbia alums I see watching right now. So shout out to the great people and the good people at Columbia because like not everyone is so. But it is what it is. I always take a little time to throw a little shade. But I love the folks that I love from there and they know who they are. Um, so I went to Columbia to focus on policy work, and then kind of got to do some research and some policy work around kind of juvenile incarceration, and felt like I wasn't done with school, and then like super excited to talk about social work education, which I believe we both had a lot of experience in. So yeah,
Hey. Um, more about what your social work education experience was like?
yeah. So I feel like as someone who's gotten to see three different levels of education as far as social work is concerned, from undergrad to master's to doctoral. Um, Kind of my undergrad is many would think is like super foundational. Like I've seen it from like two perspectives, where it's like traditional by the book social work. Jane Addams is at the top of the top, and like they wanted to do such great work, and then kind of I got the real on like social work can be something that's great, but it's often been exclusionary towards black and brown folks, especially black women. Kind of, it was really interesting to me that social workers were part of the founders of the first juvenile court system here in Chicago, where ironically I'm at. And even like through my master's, I felt like I was always kind of straddled between two worlds. Those who were super by the book, kind of teaching in a way to help you kind of like maybe pass the licensing exam or anything like that. And then those who were kind of giving us the real that all this stuff you're reading in your textbook is not going to kind of help you in the real world when you're dealing with real clients who have real problems. So how do you take these things that you're learning, apply it to you and your development and how you interact in the world, and then being able to help those that that you're going to interact with. So I feel like I learned a little late, but I'm happy I did, to be a lot more strategic on who I'm taking classes with. Like, what are the experiences that these people have? What's their teaching pedagogy, which like we'll talk about today, and then kind of, am I gonna get some like, am I gonna take away from this class how to kind of interact with people, which is I think what is the profession's all about. And then those very few folks who were like open to us critiquing the profession, like, so what's wrong with social work? Like, right? Like, how do we use this class to brainstorm how to make this a better profession, or how to make you a better social worker? Because everything isn't by the book, and it's hard to engage in that way. So, yeah. So I always feel like I was straddling kind of like these two worlds between in social work education, and it was often adjuncts who gave me the real, rather than kind of like the tenure folks. Not that there weren't some tenure folks who gave me the real, but like most of the time it was like the adjuncts who are the ones that's really in the world doing the things that we eventually want to do, who kind of gave us the real. Wasn't bound by some kind of by book or whatever kind of restrictions tenure folks may have had. How about you?
Same. So I pretty much figured out that first year of social work school that whatever I was learning in class was not really applying to my placement, didn't really apply to who I wanted to be as a person in the world. Um, and there were a lot of things. I mean, I graduated in 2008. So at that time, there were no, I was interning my second year at a public defender's office. There was no class about criminal defense. There was no class about courts. There was no class about the penal legal system. There were no classes on abolition. There was no classes about anything that was related to what I was doing in field. And at that time, when people tried to bring up issues of race and in the classroom, the professors back then were very quick to shut those conversations down. I think that still happens today, but I think less so. But back then, we never had those conversations. I felt like when I went to social work school, my fellow classmates all wanted to be therapists. And I thought everybody was going there for social justice reasons. And I was very confused by people who were there who wanted to be therapists, which I had no critique, but I had no idea that that was what people went to social work school for. I feel like at that time there was still a lot of, whether it was intentional or not, a lot of judgment about who deserves services, who deserves what, and there were definitely a lot of people that were throwaways, I think, to the social work school and to social work students, specifically people who would be on a sex offender registry. I remember couldn't even talk about that ever because
Mm-hmm.
it was like people were disgusted and they didn't want to talk about it, and there was no way that they would ever work with somebody who would be on the sex offender registry, which shut down a lot of conversations that could have been very productive. So that was my experience. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't, I knew that my experience was going to happen in the field, and it was going to happen after I graduated when I actually started working.
Yep.
And we can you want to touch on licensing really quick? Because I think that was like the next step of
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. I think like building off before we go to lights, building off along what you said, it made me think about that. I felt like a lot of times that people I was in class with were more equipped to facilitate certain conversations than the person teaching, right? So when there's conversations around race, I feel like one of two things. One, people they were getting shut down because the person was uncomfortable, or they just didn't have the skill or the knowledge base to kind of to facilitate that conversation, which is a problem, right? Like why are you teaching this class? And then we have a conversation around Black, brown communities, immigrant communities, and then when you have the student who like wants to really, really dig in deep, like it gets shut down because it's like, oh, we have X, Y, and Z to get to, you know. So I think that's an issue. And then I think kind of licensure, as like you were talking about, it limits kind of the a lot of the curriculum because so many folks who want to be therapists, who want to be licensed, which is great. Like I'm engaged to someone who's about to get her license in social work, but it's like all the classes are supposed to be geared towards preparing you for that license, right? To take this exam that like no shade towards folks who are licensed that I think is like stupid because you have to. It's like 100 and something questions, and like no test is gonna really be able to prove that you can do the job. Like it's all about you actually doing it. So we spend all this time like limiting folks and helping them take kind of this Eurocentric kind of test instead of really teaching them that not the people you're taking the test about, but the conversation that you're cutting off is these students' clients. Is going to be the people who's these students' clients. So I don't know. Like I think all standardized testing needs to go. Like on the PhD side, I think this is probably our third year not taking the GRE. It means absolutely nothing. It's just a money machine. Like you pay hundreds. You got to pay almost $1,000 to get a social work license, which is like ridiculous. Like to say like you have to pay to be like certified, like which is like the biggest scheme in the world, biggest scam in the world. But yeah, I feel like there's people who's gonna pass that test who are just honestly gonna be bad social workers. Like we do a horrible job at admissions because I've sat in classes with like literally saying like, "Yo, how the hell did you get in here? Like, how is this possible that you're sitting in this class with me?" Like, but as long as people can pay, they're gonna be able to get in. So how about your thoughts on the license?
That just makes me think of something that I always think in my head, but I don't know really what to do about. I'm sure there's somebody out there that does though, which is social work should be free and more selective. But that opens the whole conversation of gatekeeping and who gets to be in and who doesn't, which whatever. I mean, we need to have those conversations because, coming also from moving into being an actual professor, and seeing and fielding questions and fielding where people are coming from, it's important and it's valuable, and I learn a lot doing it. But sometimes I really want to have good, fruitful conversations and not have to teach people the basics of anti-racism, or the basics of respecting your fellow classmate, or the basics of you just appeared here, you know nothing about anybody else who's here except for yourself, so get to know yourself first.
Mhm.
So that's what that makes me think of. And the licensure, my comments on the licensure is same. Of when I studied for that test, I studied knowing that the answer I was giving was the right answer, but knowing it was not the thing that I was going to do in my actual place of work ever. Um, and I saw a comment in the chat of, is there anything wrong with being a therapist? No, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a therapist, but the way that social work schools teach being a therapist and working towards your clinical license, to me, in my mind, and maybe there's schools out there that are not, but it's based in the DSM. It's based on the DSM. It's based on making diagnoses. At least in New York City, there are 3 things that licensed clinical social workers that can do that licensed master of social workers cannot do, which is provide psychotherapy, provide a treatment plan based on that psychotherapy. And there's a third thing, and I can't forget it, but it also has to do with the DSM. And so the DSM was created by white men. It's being challenged all the time. There's things that are being taken out of it all the time because it's not valid. And it's just a racist tool at this point. So I just don't really believe that people can be trained therapists coming through social work school based on the DSM. But I know that there's places that train social workers who are therapists in other ways of giving therapy, of other more liberation focused ways of providing therapy that don't have to do with the DSM.
Mhm. Awesome. So we're here to talk about education. So like let's start to get into that conversation. So and then maybe like we'll mix it up. So like I'll pose the question and like answer it first. Like
Cool.
so let's talk about like what you teach and like what's your pedagogy for your teaching. How do you bring in because we both didn't say this, but both identify as abolitionist social workers, abolitionists in general. Like how do we bring that into the classrooms that we teach? So I teach at the University of Chicago. I also teach at the University of Illinois Chicago. Um, and I teach classes on race and ethnicity. And I teach classes on abolition. I teach a class on abolition in the School of Social Work at U Chicago. And I teach HUTC class, so human development classes, which I love. All classes that I love. And kind of my approach to how I teach is like less about you being able to memorize or regurgitate the things I have you read and tell me like what's the ins and outs. So if I have you read a Du Bois article, I don't care that you can tell me what Du Bois said on page 9. Like I care about like how are you processing this information? How do you apply it to your life? How do you apply it to the work that you want to do? I also teach in social work and in sociology, so it's kind of similar approaches but kind of different outcomes. Like right. Um, I give students a lot of freedom. Like this is your class as well. Like you help build this. If I get to develop my own syllabi, like we're gonna develop this together. I'll give some thoughts on readings, but excuse me, I let them design their own finals, which is like super mind blowing. The fact that like I let students design their own finals and they have so much trouble doing so. It's like until I really started teaching the way that I do, I started to realize like what's the problem with our education system as a whole, which is like students want you to tell them what to do, how to do it, and like how it should look. Like they want like not that they want their handheld, and this isn't like no slouch, like no slack or jabs at my students. I love all my students. But I'm trying to get them to like how do you take control over your education and the things that you learn and kind of how do you want to use this information that we're like sharing, right? And I've been struggling outside of my abolition class. I've been like super struggling in like other classes. Well, my HUBC class is great too because I have a great mentor who kind of who teaches from a trauma informed perspective, and that class always gets like super emotional. But I know for like other classes, it's like freedom almost scares students a little bit. Like wait, like what do I do? Like tell me what to do. And it's like you make the decision. You tell me what you're gonna do, and then I'll help you do it. Like, I laughed with you about this before, but I was like, I'm always so shocked at how I let students design their own finals, and I still get a million papers. Like, I thought you'd be done now by doing papers, but you still, something in you would not let you not do this 15-page paper, which is, hey, we got to be a little more creative than that. Like, I'm like, literally do anything. If you want to paint me a picture, paint me a picture. You got to give me a narrative behind that. But so how to make the classroom as inclusive as possible, which always doesn't work, right? Like, my teaching style doesn't work for something. Like, some is like, hey, I need you to lecture a little more. You know, I always question, like, why? But it's like, okay, I can tell you what I know about this stuff, but what is me telling you? Like, I always lead off and say, everything I say is subjective. This is how I process things. This is how I think about things. So you take it, you use it, you can disagree. Like, tell me when I'm wrong, when you think I'm wrong. You know, the only time I feel like I have a back and forth is like when I have a class full of folks who don't understand abolition. And like they can't get past the idea of a world without cages. Right? Then we'll have like some back and forth. Like, well, what do you do with this? What do you do with this? And things like that. And I can help them process. But like so many folks wants to know the ins and outs of every intricate part of an article. And it's like, no, but how are you using this? Like, what is this like bringing up for you? You know, but I always have fun in my class, which is like great. Like, love the fact that I teach. And I think you've actually visited a class that I was in with Jenny. I think Jenny brought you to a class I want to say was our first time meeting. So like, yeah, let me pass it to you to talk about the different classes that you teach and how you approach it.
It was probably for restorative justice. I always come and do a circle. Well, I used to do it alone, but now I have a co-teacher of restorative justice, Noble Williams, who is part of the Transformational Prison Project. And so when I first started teaching, I taught forensic social work, which I basically taught as though it was a defense social work class. And so everything I talked about was from, hey, I talked about from the defender perspective, not really from any other perspective, because I don't know those perspectives. And I feel like even though I'm part of the system, I'm part of the most liberatory side, but who knows, that can be argued with as well. Next week, that will be what we're talking about. So when I was teaching that class, I would say that I probably wasn't very good at it, because having to do my job all day and then go teach my class at night about the same exact thing after what could have been a day of nobody getting out of jail or of people getting arrested, basically would show up to class and probably say something like, this system is horrible. That's all you need to know. Let's talk about something. So I don't teach that class anymore, but I teach restorative justice. I started the restorative justice class at Columbia with Cameron Rasmussen. And I am so grateful to teach that class, because facilitating circles is something that I love to do that I don't get to do at my day job. It's more of my outside of work thing that I do. That's brought me a lot of healing, that helps me be in community with other people and build community. And that's what we do in class. So similar, the class, we make our decisions on how the class is going to run, what we're going to do every single time, how much we're going to talk about the readings together. Sometimes I make that call myself about talking about the readings. If we get into a topic, one class, we're going to continue that topic the next class. If an issue comes up in a class, an interpersonal issue, we make sure we talk. Some of the students believe me, but it really does change just depending on what we're doing in any given week. We also talk about what's happening in the world and what's happening in people's fields. So if there's an incident that happens in the world, or we want to talk about world affairs, then we'll spend class talking about that in circle. I just started teaching a new class last week called Mass Incarceration. And I looked at the syllabi for whatever, the teachers that I've taught that before. And then I started thinking, I really shouldn't be teaching this class. That's my other issue with social work school. It's like, I've never been to prison. I've never been to jail. I've never been arrested. Sure, there's a social worker out there who is directly impacted, who wants to teach this class, who would be great at teaching this class, who knows more than me about teaching this class. And so I'm going to try to help Columbia find those people that can teach this class. And for now, I'm just making sure we're not reading papers, we're not reading articles. We are watching films and that have the voices of directly impacted and formerly incarcerated people in there and incarcerated people in the film. We're talking when we're reading books by formerly incarcerated or incarcerated people only, because those are the only voices that we should be listening to when it comes to talking about mass incarceration. I feel like people can go out, you can find the facts yourself. They're everywhere. You can find whatever book can tell you what's happening with mass incarceration all over the world. But I think what people often don't hear or don't pay attention to is the voices of those who are directly impacted. So that's how that class is going to go. We'll see. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's one of, if I remember correctly, one of the like Hub C extensions, and I think I don't know if you know Khalil Cumberbatch used to teach that class, and folks used to love it. So, no, that's dope. There was a question about us. And sorry, I can't see, I can't keep up with like how the thing is moving, but there was a question around how do we teach? Like, we teach online or in person, and I know, like, of course, we all went through the pandemic, so I've taught online. I teach in person as well. And I feel like one strategy I used to use online that I haven't been able to figure out how to do it in person was I put students in breakout rooms to let them process alone. Sometimes they need the like professor out of the room, like, right? Because as much as I tell them, one, don't like to be called professor, just call me Durrell, please. Like, don't call me anything but that. But it's still hard for some. It's like there's still an authority. There's still this hierarchy, right? Like that we can't get rid of no matter what, because I have to grade them. And so I let them process things themselves. And then, like, one, you're talking to folks. So you should come back with something to say regardless, right? To help, like, get the conversation started. Like, I start up every class with music, which is dope, just because it's like probably half my students are coming from work or coming from field and those kind of things. Who wants to just go right into like talking about something? So we chill, we listen to music. I have them read Audre Lorde's Litany for Survival and then come up with like a playlist. So like no matter what your mood is, give me the 5 songs that like lift your spirits, and then like so I'll create a playlist and then I play music from like everyone. It always ends up like really, really dope. So I've taught them both. I like the in-person thing just because like I like to see people, talk to people, like we can move around and kind of like have conversations. And I know you've taught in person, but I'm wondering from like Zoom, was there anything from you teaching on Zoom that, you know, you use or wish you could use at all?
So I taught virtually also, even taught the restorative justice class still in circle. And okay, so spring 2020, I was not teaching a class. And so I didn't know whether that fall my class was going to be virtual or not, but then it ended up being virtual. And so did the spring of 2021. And, but in between that time, I started doing circles on my own online. So I had done circles before online with a group called Hidden Water. And so I knew how to do a circle online and I was comfortable. So I just started offering them to various folks over spring and summer of 2020. And so by the time my class came around and was going to be virtual, I was pretty comfortable doing circle online. And it was fine. I think the people in that class felt very connected fall of 2020 and spring of 2021. Everybody was in different places. Everybody came to class all the time, which was surprising. People didn't really miss that class. And it was a way to connect weekly. I feel like that's my class right now is virtual. In the fall, in person. This spring, it's been virtual on Saturday mornings. And I feel like it's the same thing. It's like a little community that we've developed for 14 weeks. And we watch different people. Every single class is different, as Noble can tell you. Our syllabus ends up being different, and then what we talk about ends up being different because it's just a new group of people and they're going to talk about different things. So
Yeah.
great. I just want to address Leti Machete about what to read, and folks can chime in the chat or if you want to add anything. But Leti asked, as an abolitionist social worker who is going to focus on trauma-focused treatment in EMDR and trauma CBT, what book should I read to teach myself liberation-focused therapeutic strategies? Off the top of my head, and there's more. Off the top, I mean, Frantz Fanon, obviously, and there's a psychiatrist in the UK named Suman Fernando, who I read a lot, and Kara Page. So if you look up those folks, that'll get you started. I'm sure other people have suggestions as well.
And pay close attention to like the public health and abolition conversation that's like rising now. That I can't remember what it was called, but like public health, like they named abolition as like a public health issue. And like I've been interacting with some folks who kind of talk about like public health abolitionist practice and like what that potentially means. I think that's like a bunch of us who are trying to understand like what does abolitionist social work mean and those kind of things. And I think kind of that's a part of the conversation I think needs to be pushed more, is like this more clinical aspect of like abolition, social work, mental health, those kind of things. And before we move on, lastly, because like a lot of the stuff I'm hearing you say brings things up for me. And I remember you were talking about how in your classes you talk about current events. And this week we did a class on it's my race and ethnicity class. We were talking about LGBTQIA groups. And I was like, you know what, forget what you were supposed to read. Like, we gotta talk about Texas. Like, there's no way that we're not gonna talk about what the hell is going on in Texas and things like that. So I started the class off and I asked them, did they know about the Stonewall riots, right? Which I think there's no way that people should not know like about Stonewall. So we start off there, like I'm introducing them like Stonewall, and then we're talking about kind of everything that's going on with Texas and like this attack on trans children and families out there. And then kind of it just reiterates like the conversation that we have around like police and surveillance, and how out there it's like they're trying to turn the everyday citizen into an extension of the police force who are supposed to be surveilling their neighbors, and now kind of like, I don't use the word telling, but like reporting their neighbors if they see kind of things, like, you know. So I think it's always important to shift. And then I remember canceling a class because like folks just look tired, you know, like they out of it. I think like I don't know how many social workers we have in the building, but to do like full like list of classes, if you were like me, you had a kid at the time, like, so like family stuff. And I think sometimes we forget as educators that like our students are humans, like, right, they're not robots. They need some time to, like, you know, I was like, hey, I'll keep y'all for 30 minutes, let me just update y'all on some stuff and I'm gonna let y'all go, like, you know. And I think that's okay. Like, I feel okay, and I feel like I've had this talk with like you and Kim and like other folks who teach, like, it's okay not to get through everything you wanted to get through. Like, it's not gonna kill them if you like didn't kind of if you didn't go over one of these readings, like, you know. But yeah, so I'll pass back to you.
Thanks. There's another question. Can you recommend some readings on abolitionist social work or abolition in general? Oh yeah, you could start with Critical Resistance, anything Angela Davis, Beyond Survival.
Mm-hmm.
Throw some stuff in the chat, folks. There's, if you don't have, I mean, there are books coming out about abolitionist social work.
Yeah.
Coming. Anything about abolition, and there's just try to connect it to the work you're doing or the work you want to do.
Yeah. And I think like getting the closest to social work would probably be like anything Dorothy Roberts writes, because she talks about, like, you know, the child welfare system. Um, there's even like not academic, but like I think about Cam and Jay's article on like social work and policing. I think Mimi, Leah Jacobs and folks have an article around defunding the police. There's some stuff. Also check out the NASW website, because we just got a bunch of resources up there as well. So, you know, there's a bunch of stuff. And whoever wrote that comment, if you send me a message or send a message to NASW, my abolition class, we make our syllabi publicly available. I think Cam teaches an abolition class and his syllabus is publicly available. So we have some social work, and Sophia Sarantakos, who brought the class to Chicago and now is at Denver, who teaches it, her class as well. All of us, our syllabi are for public use. We're not gatekeepers at all. So reach out. We got a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, I was chatting.
No,
So, I saw a question from Caitlin about talking about what the work that we do, or maybe the teaching that we do outside of
yeah.
the walls and the Zoom.
Cool. So I get in trouble for this all the time because I'm a doc student. I should be defending my dissertation proposal next month, and like I'm told all the time, I need to focus on my dissertation. But I've never been like just a student, right? I've always done something else. So the community work I do before the pandemic, I used to in collaboration with the Posing Center for Human Rights, the Human Rights Lab at the University of Chicago, and the Prison Neighborhood Arts Project. I used to participate in a think tank in Stateville, the maximum security prison in Joliet, Illinois. And hang with the guys and talk about like policy changes that folks want to see in Chicago is always great. Also, am a campaign coach for the Final Five campaign, which is a youth-led advocacy org, who kind of their mission is to close the last 5 youth prisons in the state. So I do some work there, and anything I can really get involved with. Like we have Can't Not Cops and a bunch of different abolitionist groups in Chicago. So I support kind of like their stuff when I can. But yeah, I think kind of being a part of this movement is hard to just do one thing. I feel like we all got our hands in a bunch of baskets, you know? So yeah, some of the stuff I do. How about you?
Yeah, and I think that helps me be more abolitionist minded. I feel like I'm still learning. So those of you who asked what's your definition of abolition social work, I'm going to read you what's on our website, which we came up with together. Abolitionist social workers partners in the work of ending state and institutional violence while supporting life-affirming relationships, practices, and organizing. We are committed to working towards a social work rooted in solidarity over charity, one that is decolonized, deprofessionalized, anti-capitalist, and is committed to accountability, reparations, and continual transformation. This requires that social work become unrecognizable from its current form. And so you'll hear more about this in our 4th presentation, which is about, is social work obsolete? And that's going to be really, really good. And I'm sure you have lots of there too. But outside of the 4 walls, outside of my job and outside of Columbia, I really try to this is where I get a lot of my teaching, is I partner with directly impacted people, whether it's people directly impacted by the criminal justice system, people directly impacted by the family regulation system, all kinds of systems that people are impacted by. And when I say I do whatever folks need me to do, whether it's facilitate a circle for their group, for the people they serve, any other kind of volunteering that I can help with others' organizations, I do that too. So, and I feel like I'm a leader in my job, but I love following the lead of other people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's my continuing education that I don't get continuing education credits for, but that's where I find value.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And I'll say, because I see a lot of folks are saying like, hey, I'm going to go to social work school, but X, Y, and Z. Just know you're probably not going to learn everything you need to know in your classes. I'll bet a couple dollars on it. I won't bet my last dollar because I don't know who's going to be the folks you're taking classes with. But just know very few programs have a real social work history course. A lot of them are kind of like welfare state history courses. They give you the cookie cut version of social work. But if you do, make sure you learn about kind of Ida B. Wells. You learn about the Black Child Savers movement. You learn about social work's adjacent role to the eugenics movement in like Chicago, the displacement of Native folks in Chicago or Illinois as a state. There's a lot of kind of like digging you really, really need to do to really understand kind of like why we view the profession the way that we do. And there's another question. Can you speak a little bit about deprofessionalizing social work? I can start, but do you want to start?
I mean, to me, it's really connected to what is school also. So a little bit of gatekeeping that needs to be done away with. A little bit of, please consider HBCU for social work programs. Yep, please. And the licensure, which we talked about a little bit, to me is like, we either change that, and I don't change to, but it's the way that it is. It does not prove that who takes that test is ready to do anything regarding social work. And you know, every state is different with a license. So to me, that's more of a problem, because in New York we have 2 licenses: licensed master of social work, license of clinical social work. In other states, it's only the clinical license. The requirements to get the clinical part often don't align with people's values around a lot of things, including being an abolitionist, surveilling versus not surveilling, using the DSM to diagnose based on outdated measures. So to me, it all kind of fits together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think of things like definitely we need kind of like a universal system to where like you don't have to pay for license transfer and fees and things like that. Also think about like the fact in Illinois you need a license to practice in schools. It's like, wait, what? That's another test. That has nothing to do with the, and then the name is different. Like here it's like LSW and then LCSW. So we need like like uniformity. But then I also think like, you know, for those when you start to dig into social work's history, you'll kind of understand like social work had the like the little brother, little sister like syndrome where like all the other social sciences was always excluding social work. There's even like they make everyone read this speech by Abraham Flexner, talking about is social work a profession? Like someone who's not even a social worker saying that social work is not a profession. And I think in the fight for social workers to be recognized as a profession with the likes of like psychology and econ, that's why all these restrictions are put in place, because for most of them there's some kind of testing. There's all these different things that you need to do to consider yourself someone. There's even this fight with people who saying if you're not licensed you can't call yourself a social worker. If you don't have an MSW you can't call yourself a social worker. But this is the same thing that folks were doing, like, you know, in the past. It's the same thing that Jane Addams and co was doing to black women who wanted to enter the workforce just like them. So I kind of think getting rid of all these like glass ceilings that folks have to break through, the fact that people who are formerly incarcerated who want to be social worker have to get all these letters of good conduct if they want to get licensed and those kind of things. There's always a wall to do something in social work that you have to kind of like break down. The fact that we have like the CSWE that says you have to teach this. These are the classes that you have to take in order to get the degree. The fact that we have a body like the NASW who has always been so apolitical that they never take a stance like for what's right. The reason that we have a National Black Association of Social Workers is because the NASW at the time, I can't remember what the name was, but they would say behind closed doors that they support the civil rights movement, but they wouldn't say it out loud. And this is the same thing they were trying to get the NASW to do with things that are going on in Texas, with things that was going on with Russia, with things that were going on in Palestine. Like they never want to out loud, like, you know, speak up, and they take this apolitical stance in order to kind of to not want to be the bad guy. But then to us, like this is why folks want to disassociate. I don't know how many times, Vivian, we get a question, oh, can there be like an extension of NASW? Like, from my understanding, this is supposed to be a 1 year thing, and then like, what is this, like year 2, almost year 3? You know, because I think these conversations that we have and kind of all the resources that we bring people in to share is stuff that folks have been like yearning for. So, but yeah, deprofessionalization means that, like, you know, we're not gatekeeping anyone. I think there's restrictions because everyone doesn't need to be a social worker, and I think that's fine. But yeah, you know.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Simone Aquila, if I'm saying your name right or your handle right. Please consider HBCU for social work programs. We talk about Black pioneers of social work and social justice, which Columbia does not. I don't know any course at Columbia that teaches the book Righteous Self-Determination. If you haven't read that book, I recommend it. It's by Patricia Reed Merritt. It's about Black social work movement in America. And it starts with what, Durrell, you just talked about, Black folks trying to talk at an NASW meeting and being shut out of the conversation. So get that book, Righteous Self-Determination, and suggest it in your programs. And then there was another question. Do you have any good resources to learn more about social work focused on disability ableism? I am disabled and I feel like disability understanding rights get left behind a lot. And somebody Maya Mingus. I'm going to say Leah Lakshmi Piepsna Samarasinha, if somebody can put that in the chat. And also Kara Page again.
For those questions with resources, please go to the NASW website. Send us an email because like one of the classes I teach is called Critical Social Work in a Multicultural Society, which is the second part of HUBC, which is all about these different groups. Every group you can think of has a history in it with its relationship to social work. People with disabilities, LGBTQIA, Asian folks, immigration, Latina folks, Black people, of course. And the thing I love about that class is we talk about everyone's history, which is like one of the dopest classes. I think we got too many assignments, but that's something a syllabus I don't have control over. But super dope class. So like happy to share all these readings and things that plenty of us, most of us come across. So yes, definitely reach out for the resources because if you're expecting your institution to do it, it's going to be hit or miss. Like some people you're going to fall into the perfect spot. Some people are not.
Can you talk about being a PhD student? So you have this dual role of instructor and student, and what that's like.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's and I think really for me, very few doc students look like as I do. We find a way to build our own community. I'm definitely not the only Black person in my cohort. My program, I'm the only Black person in my cohort, which at times, like and I love my cohort to death, but at times that can be like a little alienating or whatever. But I feel like I hold a number of roles because one, I have a bachelor's in social work, and I think kind of a lot of folks don't understand like how different that is than someone who just has a master's. Like that's 4 other years of social work, reading and training, and like learning about history and things like that I bring to the table. And I identify as an abolitionist. We have a gang of doc students who identify as abolition or just want to learn more about abolition. So I bring that perspective to where I'm like, hey, it's not enough to just do research on a group. Like you have to be getting close. Like proximity, my advisor, my dissertation chair, Ruben Miller, who's like one of the most abolitionist sounding speaking people I know in this world, but he does not identify as an abolitionist, which like is confusing. Every last one of his doc students are abolitionists though. But like he talks a lot about, and what I believe in is like getting really close to kind of like the communities you want to impact most. So it's not enough to just want to do work around juvenile incarceration. You got to walk the halls that a lot of the folks walk. I do qualitative work because I believe in elevating the voices, as you said a lot, Vivianne, elevating the voices of those. Like I can't tell their story. They need to tell their story. I'm just in a privileged position to where I can try to bring their voices in front of a group of people who are willing to kind of like read. So I think like being a PhD student.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Uh-oh. You just went out again.
Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah, someone keeps calling me, which I knew was gonna happen. But yeah, as a doc student, you're marrying the topic. So like, I go all in with that, but then I do kind of like the extra stuff on the side. But even doc education is different as well. You're in smaller classes. So you get to dig into topics a lot deeper. I do feel like that I've taken better classes because you can be a lot more strategic on what you take. You don't have to take everything. There's a few required things. But by the time you get to where I'm at, you kind of understand the game, and like some people aren't equipped. So like reviews means a lot to like look up someone's course reviews and things like that. So yeah, and I try to apply these principles in my research and the things that I do in the talks that I give. So
I have 8 minutes, I think. And so I think it's good for us to end on what we envision, right, for social work education. And folks, if you want to share your vision for social work education in the chat, please do. Go for it, Durrell.
I envision educators realizing we need training all the time. Like we're never going to be experts. I don't think the word expert needs to exist. I don't think I'll ever be an expert in juvenile incarceration. It will always be something that I haven't read, something to learn, someone who's doing something that's innovative. And it's the same thing with education. Like the way that I'm teaching now is probably not the way I'm going to be teaching in 10 years because new conversations are going to happen. There's going to be more trainings. I'm going to continue to learn and grow. So we can't get too cocky that we're stuck in our ways and like, this is the only way that I'm going to do it. So, I think learning has to be bi-directional. So learn from your students as much as you try to have them learn for you. My vision is that social work or all professions starts to teach the truth rather than what comes from a book, and like really teaching what's going on and really having their students kind of process and reflect rather than trying to kind of memorize something so that they can pass a test and answer their questions, which I think is easy to do, but depending on who you ask. And how about you?
Yeah, I also think I won't be teaching the same way if I'm teaching at all in the future. But I know I this new class I'm teaching. They didn't give me a room where I could make a circle of chairs. It's like auditorium style. So I'm not used to being at the front of the room and having that. So I think for me, that's the vision for part of the future is discussions in circle, or something like that, but getting rid of that, I don't know, that power dynamic as much as possible, because we're all still learning and all of your professors are still learning. Maybe they choose not to, but they should be still learning. And so that also, that whoever's teaching at a social work school, whether they have their PhD or not, you still need to see what's happening in the real world. You can't be stuck in your research box and not going outside of that, especially in social work. That's how I feel. And then just all of the, I don't know, the core classes and I guess mostly connecting what's happening in the classroom to the actual real world. That's what used to get on my nerves in social work school. That's what gets on my nerves now about social work school is this disconnect between reality and the,
Mhm.
so that's my vision.
I think everyone should be required to take some kind of anti-racist class, and then that we start doing like the anti-racist work and stop creating DEI programs for everything, because DEI programs is not the response and it's not the end all be all. And I love my folks who work in the DEI programs, but like that's a band-aid to slap and said I did it. So yeah.
Well, thanks, Durrell. I did enjoy this conversation. I had more to say than I thought I would. So thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. And this will be recorded. This is being recorded and will be transcribed as well. So it will be up. Thanks everyone.
Thanks. See you guys.